Ah, the sizzle of McDonald's sausage. It's enough to make you crave your favorite breakfasts. Enough to head over to McDonald's. Enough to make you really wish this commercial were scratch and sniff.
And if you're a sausage person, now get 2 satisfyingly savory sausage McGriddles, sausage biscuits, or sausage burritos for just $3.33. Or mix and match. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I need new music.
This is the JJO Discover New Music Podcast.
The hardest working man in rock and roll. I think that's safe to say. Ladies and gentlemen, James Dupree. Jesse, how are you, my friend?
It's good to talk to you, man. Good. It's been a minute.
It's been a while. What's crazy, though, is I feel like I just got to see you because I watched a 6-hour marathon of Full Throttle Saloon on Defy the other day. So you and I just feel like we just caught up.
Those reruns on the Quest Network have been really a trip because, I mean, I was not aware that they had picked the reruns up and were playing them. And all of a sudden, it was just everybody's, hey, been watching the show. So it's good for them to do that. I mean, that was a magic moment in time, at the original Full Throttle. And, now we have the fire burnt that place down. We have 600 acres of off the hook. That old place was on 32 acres.
Yeah.
And now we're on 600 plus acres, and we have an Olympic-sized swimming pool and all you can eat breakfast buffet, dinner buffet, a convenience store, 3 racetracks, a runway for airplanes. I mean, it's crazy.
It's just bigger and better, which I think is the Jesse James Dupree model, man. You're always finding ways to entertain and just make things to that next level, whether it's your liquor that you got out there or the Full Throttle or music, which is why we're here today. One of your many ventures that obviously most of us know you for. Let's talk about this. Breathing Fire, the new album. You really didn't plan on making this album, did you? This kind of came organically.
I felt guilty because I had not listened to an album in a long time from front to back. I mean, when was the last time you listened to a full album from front to back? And I think a lot of people may have gotten away from doing that. And so I felt guilty. So I went back and I listened to High Voltage, AC/DC's High Voltage, and I listened to it twice. Then I went on and I listened to Highway to Hell, and then I listened to Back in Black, and then I went to dinner. And I didn't think anything else about it. And the next day I woke up and I had this song in my head. I was going, what album's that off of? And I went back through all those albums, could not find it. Good news was that I got to listen to all those albums again, but I couldn't find it. And then I picked up my guitar and I realized I was just inspired. And so the next thing you know, I'm sitting on the couch, working out that idea and a couple more ideas that I was having. And I was recording them on my cell phone just so I didn't lose the riffs, And then Nigel, my son, walks in because he lives up in Nashville, and he runs around being good looking and playing drums up in Nashville. And he came in the door, and I said, because I live in Atlanta, he goes, and I said, what are you doing home? He goes, well, I came home to get a free meal. And so I said, go lace up the drums. We went in the studio and we started recording. I called Roman. Roman came over, and the next thing you know, we had these just fun jams on this, songs on tape. But I still wasn't planning on doing anything with it because it sounded so much like AC/DC. I mean, It sounded, and you'd say too much like AC/DC for me to do anything with it. But with the caveat that I didn't know that Brian Johnson from AC/DC, the singer, was going to call me about 2 days later. And I had not spoken with Brian in about 6 months. Brian's got a new book that's out about his life before AC/DC. And plus he was getting ready to go do that festival that they played out in California. So I wasn't going to ever bother him. He had called me to go to dinner with him about 6 months ago, and I was out of town, so I missed that. I hated it. And but 2 days after we'd laid this stuff down, Brian calls. And, hey, Jesse, how you doing, me son? I'm drinking some of your liquor. And so we talked about whiskey. He had a buddy over, and they were having dinner, and he opened up a bottle of Barrel Strength I'd sent him. And one thing went to another, and I said, well, look, I wasn't going to call you, but since you called me, you got to help me write these songs.
Right.
And so he said, send them down here. So we started working, and Sterling, the guy that works with me here in the office, he walked into the studio when we were recording it. He goes, that sounds like vinyl. And I thought, well, man, we got to do a vinyl record then. So there's a vinyl There's a vinyl copy of this at jessejamesdupree.com, limited edition vinyl. It's a slab of rock and roll. It really is.
I love it, man. And obviously, you are in that interesting place that most people don't get, where Brian Johnson of AC/DC calls you and you can pick his massive musical brain and all the years that are there and inspired that. Now, you've known him for a long time, so I'm sure maybe this doesn't make sense. Do you still get like pinch me moments when you're working with Brian, or he comes in or anything like that? Because he obviously inspired you all the years ago. So it's got to still be moments where it seems a little surreal.
Well, you know it. It's already. It's the same as me getting to do this interview with you. I'm just going, God Almighty, I can't believe I'm pitching myself. I get to do this interview. So, rock, man. You got that is true. I'm glad to be talking to you. No, seriously, it is, and you're right, because this is the biggest band in the world with AC/DC, and the fact that he'll come and stay at the house, and there's no bodyguards. Rock, he's everything you would want the lead singer of AC/DC. Just a real guy, and such an inspiration in that way. And you do forget he's so disarming. Sometimes there's things that happen that remind you. I'll give you an example. He and Cliff Williams, the bass player for AC/DC, they came and stayed at the house for a couple of days. And Cliff took the guest bedroom, and Nigel was in his room, and I sent my youngest daughter to stay with my mother. And so Cliff took the guest bedroom, and Brian was just going to stay in my young daughter's room. And I didn't think anything about it, because he's just such a nice guy. He's unpretentious. He don't give a damn. And but I went down the hallway just to check on him before he crashed, just to make sure if he needed anything before he went to bed, because we'd been out drinking and eating, had a great meal, and we'd had a few drinks and stuff. And I said, Brian, you okay? You need anything before you crash? He said, nah, I'm fine. He's sitting because I got me a bottle of water. I'll see you in the morning, whatever. And I sit there and look into the room, and here's the lead singer of AC/DC crawling into my daughter's bed. It's a pink bed with Winnie the Pooh mural over the headboard.
Of course. So
here's the guy, and I thought to myself, here's the guy that I camped out for 2 nights to get front row tickets to see Back in Black, and he's sleeping in this pink bed with a Winnie the Pooh mural over the top of it, and he could just not even give a damn. He was, but that's the kind of guy he is. He's just he's a great guy, and I've got so many Brian Johnson stories. Because he's such an inspiration, and I'm so proud. Nobody in AC/DC ever works outside their band, so to be that guy that gets to work with Brian and do stuff like this, it's a big deal.
I'll never forget, quick side story to share, my juxtapose Brian Johnson story. You and I and Randy Hawk and Ski, and a whole group of us. I think Vanna was there. We were having dinner in Vegas one night, and you busted out your phone and you played this hilarious message from Brian. And for me, because AC/DC is my favorite band of all time, I'm a diehard. And so here I am sitting next to you, Jesse James Dupree, who's playing a Brian Johnson message. I was like, there's no way this is happening in Las Vegas. But again, just to kind of jump off of that, and your relationship, and now seeing him help you with this latest album, and of course the current track that we have out right now, which is awesome. Never Gets Old, which we're all hearing, and we'll hear more from Brian and you and the new album release. You also paid homage. I love this. You talked about waiting out, camping out for 2 days for Back in Black, front row tickets and everything when they did that tour to support that album. And you kind of paid homage to those diehards that do that, the camp out and wait for those front row tickets with this music video. Tell us about how that came to be and what you lined up for the diehards out there, the true.
That's such a magic era of music that's lost now. And it goes, along with the people that don't listen to albums from front to back, which I was guilty of that myself. But there was a time, just like it's hard to explain to some people, there was a time before these things, these cell phones, and there was a time before that. And we used to go down to the mall, and the Ticketron place was in the mall. And we would camp outside the Rich's department store. And there was a kind of a code, a rule of conduct that whoever got there first got to start the list. And so you would have a spiral notebook, and you would write ZZ Top, or you'd write AC/DC, or you'd write Kiss, or you'd write, Ted Nugent, or whatever. You'd write whoever it was that was coming. And then you would, number one, you put your name number one, and then whoever's, you put the names on the list. And then you'd have little rules. There'd be a roll call every 2 hours. And somebody can only speak up for you twice throughout the whole 24-hour period. So if you run to go get pizza, somebody could say, yeah, he's here. He just went to get pizza. but that could only happen twice in the roll call that happened every 2 hours or something. And you camped out, and you had to be orderly during the day. You would camp out along down the sidewalk, and everybody just kind of be composed and in the line down the sidewalk around the mall, because the security would make us. But when the mall would close, underneath that parking garage where the Riches, where we were camped out, would just turn into a party, and we would party all night long. And then you'd kind of crawl back to your respective spot, before the store would open, and then you'd sit there the whole day again, and then another party would happen that next night. And then the next morning, you would all line up at the door, and the security guy would come to the door, and they would let us in 10 at a time, the first 10. And we'd walk through the women's lingerie and the men's shoes and the whatever, and you'd go back to this little cubby hole. And that's where the little DOS computer was that was selling the tickets. And that's how you got your front row tickets for concerts. And it's just such a magic time and such a commitment. And the bands really meant something to you because, for that level of commitment. And I saw an article yesterday where there's some people over in Argentina or something that have camped out for 5 months to get Taylor Swift front row.
Wow.
But over there, they're still camping out, in the but I thought, that's 5 months is a bit excessive, but still it's an experience of camping out and that dedication that you'll never forget.
Well, I think it's so cool, and it's exciting to see you continue on that, being that champion for rock and roll, and even looking back at the good old days. We're still having fun and still putting out new records. Obviously, you are, which again, Breathing Fire, going to be very exciting. Get out there, get it on vinyl, limited edition, or wherever you're going to get to it and listen to it, front to back, mind you, front to back. That's what we want to do.
Listen, rate, share, subscribe. Discover new music now at WJJO.com, in the JJO app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rock has a new interview every Thursday evening between 6 and 7. 94.1 JJO.
I need new music.
This is the JJO Discover New Music Podcast.
Do you got a favorite track on the album? Maybe one that really...
That's what I was going to say. My publicist said, what are the feature tracks? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that would be tracks 1 through 10. Here's the thing. On this one, and I can't say this about all my albums, mm-hmm. The first Jackal album I can definitely see, because you can listen to that first Jackal album from front to back and it takes you somewhere, Mm-hmm. And there's certain albums that do that. This, I'm hoping people find it to be one of those albums. You can, from song to song to song, it just keeps you in that rock and roll spirit, celebrating the fundamentals of rock and roll. And I hope and pray that everybody finds that in the record, because asking me to name my favorite song off the record is like saying, okay, who's your favorite child? Mm-hmm. But let's also be honest. Everybody does have their favorite child, right? But if I had to say, I can talk about each song as to why they stand out. They're special. There is a song called, the title track is a son bitch called "Breathing Fire," and it's just perfect for exemplifying the attitude of the whole record. And then there's a song called "Stranded," and "Stranded" is it's a heavy song. It was the way it all came about, and it's probably the one song that it's in the middle of the album, so it kind of just has a flow to it, and it adds to the album's character. But it's a heavy song, and I'd rather not share what it's about. I'd rather people just find it and let it mean what it means to them. That's why I don't like politics and music either, because that's not a political song. But just in the same virtue of, like, "When Will It Rain?" That I know what that meant to me when I wrote it, but I've had veterans come back from Iraq and Iran or whatever, Afghanistan, fight, and tell me what that song meant to them. Or I've had different people tell me what that means to them. And I'd never want to spoil them by saying, no, it actually means this or means that. And the same thing with "Stranded," but, and it's the same thing with, this is not a political route. That's why I don't like artists that get political, because people want to listen to an artist to escape and get away. They don't want to listen to it to think about, are they a Democrat or a Republican?
Right. And we get enough of that crap on the news, so it's nice to just be able to put on a record and enjoy it. Well, again, we cannot wait. Brand new from Jesse James Dupree, "Breathing Fire," and a little bit of Brian Johnson sprinkled in there as well, which is always good. Well, we got Brian's fingerprints all over it. I love it, man. Well, that's not a bad thing at all for anybody involved. Well, now that we got the important stuff out of the way, I have a couple things I want to do. I don't know. I may be putting you in a spot with this one, but when I was researching this and talking with you and listen, you talk about, having Brian on this and this whole journey kind of started by diving into some old AC/DC albums. Could you pick one album if you could only have one AC/DC album? Again, me being, that's my number one. That's what got me into rock and roll. And that's one of the hardest questions because with the Bon Scott era, the Brian Johnson era, and all of the collection they have, could you pick one AC/DC album?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be Back in Black. I mean, that was it changed the world. I'll tell you, one night, Brian Johnson and I was getting this award right here. This was from a radio station that gave me an award for being the most played band on that station that year. And so they flew me into this festival. I was out on tour, but I flew into this festival and I called Brian. I said, hey, I'm going to be at this festival. And he goes, just come to the house and we'll go up together. So I flew to his house and he lived about 90 miles south of there. We went out to go to the festival and he was driving and he opened up the garage and there was a brand new Aston Martin. And it was the most badass car. And I opened the door and the leather smell knocked me down. And we made that 90-mile run in about 45 minutes. I mean, he had that so much getting it. And we went to the festival and we were there a good bit of the day and they presented me with this plaque. And then it was getting a little bit late and he leans over to me and he goes, well, if you don't mind me, son, maybe we can go back to the house and get us some dinner and some drinks. And, I said, okay, let's go. So we duck walked out of there and went back to, and he was parked backstage. He parked kind of out and away from everybody in that Aston Martin so nobody'd be around it, And we go out and we get in that Aston Martin and out of the dark comes these two guys come running across the field and they come running up to his window and he rolls the window down and they got their Back in Black album.
Awesome.
And they said, will you please sign this? Please, God, sign this. And somehow or another they went and got that album and made it back to the backstage and say, sure me, son. And he's such a gentleman, he goes, yeah, and Jesse will sign it too. And I'm sitting there going, I'm not worthy, And but he's such a nice guy. And so he signs the record and hands it back to him. And they took off into the dark like Beavis and Butthead, just Brian Johnson, and we're sitting there and the car's running and you can hear the music off in the background and he's just staring ahead and it was kind of quiet other than the music off in the field. And I didn't know something was wrong. And I said, you all right? Are you okay? And he went, yeah. And he just staring at it. He goes, just always wondered about that autograph thing. He said, where somebody wants your signature. He goes, I never understood that. And I said, yeah. I said, well, maybe for me, I said, but people know where they were when Elvis died, or they know when they were when the first man landed on the moon, or they know where they were when something historical happened like that. And everybody knows where they were the first time they heard Back in Black.
Yep.
I said, so I can understand it, and then he just looked at it, and then we drove off. He didn't want to think about it, but he's a great guy.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And I think Back in Black is a good choice for anyone. All right. Well, before I let you go, we're going to do rapid fire. Also, I have one request at the very end of everything. So let's do a quick one here. And then my final request with Jesse James Dupree. No wrong answers. Rock and roll hoochie coo or rock and roll all night?
Rock and roll all night.
Mashed potatoes or baked potatoes?
Baked potatoes.
And I've been getting more into baked potatoes. I think I'm
like baked potato dry, no sour cream, no cheese, no nothing.
You just dry. Oh.
Yeah, just dry.
Like a cowboy out on the range. I love that.
Yeah.
Disco or techno?
Disco.
Soaked jeans or damp socks?
Soaked jeans.
Okay. All right. Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster? Who'd you rather see?
Bigfoot.
Lastly, one punch from Mike Tyson or 100 punches from the Where's the Beef Lady?
Oh God, I'd take those down. That beef. Where's the beef lady all day long? Yeah, you wouldn't survive Mike Tyson. He'd knock you out.
Even like at 50%, I'd feel like I would just crumble into a pile of dust with him.
I'd say I would hate to have to whip his ass.
You'd
be there. Right. You'd be there a minute.
Right, exactly. Perfect. Awesome. Now we got all that out of the way. The last thing, I got to share this with you. My daughter, who turned 2 this last June, she loves the yow that you do at the end of Lumberjack. We were listening to it, and as soon as she heard the chickens and the yow, so what's the best way I can emulate that for her to crack? What's the key to the Jesse James Dupree? Yow? You know what I'm talking about? That you do. That's so key.
Yeah, you had to have watched some of those old black and white westerns.
Yeah.
Like I did when I grew up, because in all those old western movies, and again, they used to, the TBS network, the Turner network, they used to play on Sundays, they do all those vintage, black and white cowboy movies. I don't know if you remember that or not. It was years ago, but they used to have a marathon where they just play all those. But I used to love those old movies, and the Roy Rogers or the whatever, and but there's always somebody in there that was going back there and chewing the chickens or getting the pigs out of the way or
there it is.
But that's right. Just get on down the road.
We were listening to it, and then she's in the back, and all I can hear is just doing this in her little 2-year-old voice. And it just, I died. So, all right. Well,
and by the way, those were real chickens in the studio with us.
Oh, real chickens in there?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, we recorded the album in the studio. The Captain and Tennille on. Do you remember the Captain and Tennille? They had a TV show, but they had that song, Love Will Keep Us Together. Love will keep us together.
Oh, yeah.
But they own the studio that we recorded our first album in. And Guns N' Roses recorded Appetite for Destruction there. The Damn Yankees recorded there. The Motley Crue, the Trap, and we went and it's still a sterile studio in LA for us. So we went and got 40 chickens and roosters from up in north of California and over in the valley, and we brought them back and we just let them loose in the studio. And they used to roost. And Ted Nugent was shooting his bow and arrow. The Damn Yankees were doing overdubs and mixes. And he was shooting his bow and arrow out back in this little lounge area. And so we stole a couple of bales of his hay. And so we had that strewn out in the studio, and the chickens would roost at night. They would roost over in a drum booth. Right. So when we got through cutting the lumberjack, that because we did the song live every night, we just took the best track, the best version of it, and put it on the record. Yeah. And but I went running in the drum booth and was shooting the chickens, and the producer was following me with the microphone, and those chickens were for real. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the most jackal story I think I've ever heard in my out of all the ones that I know. All right, so I got to watch the old timey westerns, and I will perfect that. All right, I'll work on it.
You got it.
Jesse, thank you so much for humoring me. More importantly, thank you so much for talking new music and get it. Breathing Fire from Jesse James Dupree. We appreciate it. We love you, buddy.
Crank it up. Have a good day, man. Thank you, bro.
Listen, rate, share, subscribe. Discover new music now at WJJO.com, in the JJO app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rock has a new interview every Thursday evening between 6 and 7. 94.1 JJO.